everyone. You know that feeling when you take a photo and technically it's fine, but it still feels like it's missing something. It's sharp, you have a good subject matter, but it's missing that mood or the magic that makes people stop scrolling. I used to struggle with that too until I started focusing less on the technical side and more on how to create atmosphere in a photo. In this video, I'm going to break down a few simple ways you can start making your photos feel dreamy and cinematic. And today, we're going to be focusing on a mixture of photography, so this can apply to portraits, but also travel and everyday photos as well. One of the first things I do to create that dreamy cinematic feel is shoot with a telephoto lens. So basically anything from 85mm to 600mm and beyond. As a portrait photographer who likes to travel, I just use whatever lenses I already own. For a while, that meant using my 135mm f1.8 prime, and I've also spent a lot of time shooting with my 85mm on both Sony and Lumix systems. I realized that using telephoto lenses for travel and landscape photography is something I really enjoyed doing, so I decided to add two zoom lenses to my kit, the 200 to 600mm f4.5 to 5.6 and the 70 to 200 f2.8 GM2, which has quickly become one of my favorite travel lenses. The reason I like doing this is because a telephoto lens helps compress the scene you're photographing. This compression has a way of making the background look like it's closer to the subject, which causes a slightly otherworldly feel to your images, as you don't naturally see scenes like this with your eyes. A telephoto lens is also a great way to isolate certain elements of a scene. Instead of capturing everything you see with a wide-angle lens, you can use a telephoto lens to capture an essence of that landscape. This gives your photo a sense of mystery, as you're not giving the viewer all the information. The next thing I like to do to capture dreamy images is, unfortunately, put in the effort to wake up early and be at my location just before sunrise. It's worth it. Good lighting is one of the most important aspects of photography, and it's even more important when you want to create cinematic photos. It is currently pre-sunrise. We've got about 10 minutes to go before it pops up behind those peaks. And we are walking to find a little photo spot to shoot with. What I like to do is try to get to my location about 30 minutes before the sun is set to rise. And the reason for this is because when apps gives you a sunrise time, that's the time the sun is going to start appearing over the horizon. But the beautiful colors you see in the sky can happen anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes before that, and that's what you want to be capturing. It also definitely helps if there's some cloud coverage in the sky as well, as that's what makes those colors happen. Aside from sunrise, you also have golden hour to shoot with, which is beautiful, but I find it can be a little more hit and miss to photograph during this time, since it is more accessible and there will most likely be lots of other people there if it's a really popular location. There's also blue hour, which is the time after the sun is set behind the horizon, but there's still ambient light, and this can be a really nice lighting scenario to shoot with if you want to create more moody looking images instead. So some landscapes work with sunrise and others don't. So something important you'll need to do is a bit of research as to whether it's even worth it getting up for sunrise or not. And this will all depend on the type and style of image you're trying to create. So some things to look out for is the direction of the sun to the location. Will your photo spot be backlit, or will there be direct light? I find direct light is a great way to capture high contrast, vibrant images compared to backlight, which causes low contrast photos with some white skies and less saturation. The next tip I have is to think about incorporating movement in some way in your photos. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. First, you can think about using a slow shutter speed to create motion blur. This can either be traditional motion blur, where you keep your camera on a tripod to photograph, let's say, a waterfall, so the water is blurred but the rest of the image is sharp. You can also do handheld long exposure shots where the entire frame is blurry to add that dreamy atmosphere to your photos. Another way is to use a faster shutter speed and have a subject who's moving in the frame. You can pose them in different ways, like having your subject walking or running. It gives your photo a sense of adventure. You could even have them spinning, maybe even get shots where your subject's hair or dress are being carried by the wind. Even though in all these photo examples the motion is frozen because I'm using a faster shutter speed, with these poses you are still conveying that sense of movement. So keeping on with this distortion aspect, when you're creating dreamy photos, you don't want to worry too much about the ultimate sharpness of your lens. A dreamy photo is more about the atmosphere rather than being technically perfect, as I find the imperfections are what makes photography interesting. And there are two ways you can introduce blur into your photos in an aesthetically pleasing way. First is with a mist filter. These filters do such a beautiful job at softening the light and textures in your photos to make them look super dreamy. It is a commitment though to shoot with these filters, as you can't undo the effect. I actually use this Helix filter kit, which is magnetic, so I take photos without the filter first to make sure I have my clear, sharp photo. Once I'm happy with that, I'll pop a mist filter on to get a couple with that effect, and then take it off again if I'm capturing something else afterwards. This is not sponsored, by the way. I just really like these because the magnets are super strong and it's really easy to take on and off throughout the day while you're traveling or even while you're at a portrait photo shoot. If you don't want to spend money on a filter, or you don't want to commit to shooting with a filter, which I totally understand, you can also do this effect in post. So here I am in Apathy, and I'm going to head to my structure slider, which is also known as clarity, and I'm going to bring it down to about -5. This is going to soften up your image a little bit and get rid of that digital sharpness look. I usually use this setting anywhere between -10 to -1, so I don't go too heavy-handed with it. My second last tip, before we get to the last and what I think is the most important one, is to really think about your subject matter and composition when creating dreamy photos. As you can see in this video, I love incorporating portraits into my landscape photography. A person in the frame can act like an anchor. So an anchor is a visual element which is usually placed in the foreground that gives the image a sense of depth and context. It sort of acts like a starting point for the eye, which then leads you to look at the rest of the photo. And this doesn't always have to be a person. I just like using a person because I do portrait photography, but you can use any object or part of the environment as an anchor. So things like a rock or a flower can be your subject in landscape photography. Something else to keep in mind with your compositions that I find works for dreamy photos is to keep them on the minimal side. You want to keep your scenes clean and uncluttered so there aren't any distractions, with a really strong focal point to the photo. You can also think about using negative space, so leaving empty space around your subject, whether it's a person or some trees, to emphasize them more in the frame. Last but not least, I've spoken about this a couple of times on my channel, but I cannot say this enough. Color theory is everything when it comes to photography. Once you have all your technical aspects down pat, you know what focal length to choose, you know what camera settings to shoot with, you even know what time of day to get to your location for a particular lighting style. The color palette you choose to shoot with and edit with is going to really set the tone to your final images. I have a couple of examples to share with you of this. Since I do a lot of environmental portraits while I'm traveling, outfit choice is one of the easiest ways to show what I mean about color palette. So I was in White Sands National Park earlier this year, which is absolutely stunning, by the way. I highly recommend it if you haven't been there before. We got there right for sunrise and I captured some portraits. I decided to wear an outfit, actually literally the one I'm wearing right now, that complements the location and lighting we were shooting with. So I initially had dark pants, which I felt like were too contrasty for the sand, so I quickly got changed for my pants to match the sand and my jumper to match the soft sunrise colors. The next day, I wanted to try something completely different, and I decided to go with the contrasty black pants, and I wore a red jumper so I could be the solo color that jumps out from the desaturated landscape. This monochromatic look can work somewhere busier as well. So in Japan, I was taking photos with the Tokyo Tower, which is bright red and really pops compared to the desaturated city buildings around it. And I decided to wear a completely black and white outfit so I can blend into the environment, and we only really have a pop of red coming through. In post, I also decided to desaturate the green trees again so we could focus more on that pop of red. Speaking of editing, another way to introduce a color palette is in post-production. You can aim to create soft, muted tones while editing, you can desaturate harsh colors to keep things cohesive, and you can also lower the contrast to maintain that dreamy mood to your photos. So I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know which one was your favorite tip or advice in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. I make new videos every single week, so I'll see you all next time. Bye.